So in your report, I think you clearly identified the importance of starting, if we're going to start a new program, that there be at least 2 kindergarten classes to make sure that when they get into middle school, there is a core or a critical mass of students, basically. The other part, and I think this was done, I think, in the Southeast, is there a number of schools started at least one. So that way, when you get into middle school, or you know, eventually to Franklin, you know, there is a critical mass. One of the things that I didn't see in the report is the mention of the. I mean, there is some mention in regards to the North increasing its numbers, particularly Latino students in the North, but there's no exploration, for example, of Cesar Chavez being the center of a dual language immersion program, all immersion program, given that
school-wide.
Right. I mean, I think that there were some discussions in the past year of regular, you know, Scott now, and there's not too many other schools nearby that they can say if there are some students that are not going to be entering this program, that we are able to provide an alternative. In the North, there are a number of schools, and you know, I was looking at the numbers in regards to Latino students in the North or in the schools. I mean, you have Cesar Chavez, you know, probably 58% right now, Scott 56%, regular 51%, Lent 41%, James John 41%, Seton 40%, Peninsula 37%, Beach 34%, and so forth. So, you know, there is critical mass in many of those schools in the North in particular, and also in the Northeast, but I think that we have to do a little bit better. The other is I think in the report, is specific, you know, plan in regards to engaging the families. I think that there is importance, and I think recognition from directors knows question of, you know, how good are we at educating the opportunities for people. But then the other part of it is how good are we within the schools themselves that have those programs to actually educate and tell people what the opportunities are. And that's, you know, I think who's gonna, you know, I guess I want to get back to the point of who's gonna be responsible. Say, for example, you say, okay, you know, we should start something at Lent. We should start something at Bridger or you know, like second class. Who am I going to hold accountable for next year? Who's actually talking to those communities? And
I believe I am. And so just to respond quickly, HR is meeting with our dual language principals next week, as is enrollment lottery at their monthly meeting. And so we are trying to get ahead of that. But the principal onboarding is more than just which principal gets placed where. And so we're using the dual language guiding principles, which is a document that's used pretty much nationwide as a guidebook. Director Atkins saw it at the Equity Conference, to assess where we are compared to where we should be and to make those expansions thoughtfully. So in looking at the North End, our approach, rather than approaching one school or two schools that have critical mass, our approach, and this was really advised by somebody else, that we get together all of the principals and look at the map, give them the 101 of why are we even having this conversation, because this is not an area educators know a lot about out of school or even out of administration. So giving them the information of why we're doing this and the achievement gap closure, and then looking at the map holistically. So an example might be in the North End, if we identify a site that goes school-wide, it's a lot easier because you have a nearby school where you can send families for whom dual language is not a choice or possibly an appropriate placement for the child. And so Cesar Chavez needs another kindergarten, absolutely, next year. And so what I'm counting on and what I'm working with the RA and the principal on is any vacancy in that building, regardless of expansion, has to be filled with a bilingual teacher based on parent communication and, again, the expansion and growth of the dual language program. And so that's one of the things we need to think about when we go school-wide. What is the potential impact for the students who are not speakers of the target language? students who don't choose that program, do we have a viable plan for those students? And that involves enrollment and transfer. And I think part of our problem in the past is that we haven't included the right enough people at the table to have these discussions.
So I guess I also heard, as I'm thinking about our next conversation of enrollment balancing and transfer, or enrollment balancing, I think that I heard you clearly state that as far as an immersion program and our constant need for highly qualified teachers in those programs, that from immersion program standpoint, you would prefer middle school programs because it reduces having to spread those middle school teachers across K-8s. Is that what I'm hearing?
You know, initially I would have said that was accurate, but what I'm saying is I prefer that the students for whom Spanish is the elementary language go to fewer than 8 sites so we can build more critical mass. So that doesn't necessarily mean going K-5. So if we were to identify those sites, yeah, and with the support of Judy, who knows these things of how many people are in what building and what's possible, developing a plan that minimizes the number of sites for which we need to staff and schedule the students.
So, and again, another way that it dovetails, I've heard partly through the enrollment balancing process this year, is some folks at Beach, for example, have recommended, why don't we look at Cesar Chavez and make that a Spanish-speaking middle school, for example. That relieves some overcrowding issues at Beach. It allows Chavez to get to a place that has a larger middle school program. So I just, it doesn't sound like that's something that's part of the discussion right now. But I just want to put it out there as something that I've heard through that process. And then lastly, I'll just mention that, again, supply and demand for teachers is probably going to get in our way, but what would happen if Portland Public Schools decided that every school, every student of ours was taught 2 languages?
And we had this conversation earlier. We can make that proclamation, and we should, in my opinion, and that does not mean that every single student has to do it through a dual language experience. And so that is one of the things that binds a school within a school. When some kids are in dual language, other kids are getting FLES, which is an acronym for foreign language for English speakers. So it might be a little bit lighter and their proficiency might be different, but those are the choices. You're going to learn a little bit of Mandarin, or you're going to be immersed and learn a lot of Mandarin. I would like to see that. And we wouldn't be the first district to do that.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you so much, Chair Gonzalez and directors.
And Director Vilayo is going to take over now and have this